Hey everyone, today's guests are Becky and Fran of the Shrink Wrap podcast. We got to record this episode at the Pheasant Canteen podcast studio owned by our friend Brody Mueller, who's been on the show a couple of times. He produces the show for them. And when they first started airing, last year, maybe even 2020, I started following them and I knew that they were the women I wanted to talk to about mental health in small communities. There's still a stigma. There's still so much to overcome. And these two have a very down-to-earth and approachable approach, if I can say that. They make it simple. They make it easy. And these things aren't easy, but they're also very common. Being human is tricky, and they help us navigate that so beautifully, and they're wonderful human beings. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode with Becky and Fran. By the way, what you're going to hear when my voice goes away is their standard intro because of the disclaimer. I chose to keep that in our intro as well. So please enjoy. They are wonderful, and you're going to love them.
Welcome to Shrink Wrap, a podcast where Franne and Becky give proper respect to various mental health and wellness topics,
while adding in a little bit of smart assery that they just can't seem to contain.
This podcast cannot and does not constitute therapy advice.
However, we do hope that you find the information we share with you helpful and entertaining.
Please be advised that this podcast discusses topics that can be sensitive to some listeners. Use appropriate discretion.
Hey everybody, welcome to Shrink Wrap.
Welcome.
And today's a very special, I feel like Grey's Anatomy / Private Practice crossover episode. The shrinks are combined with Miss Rebecca. Is it Undum? Am I saying that right?
Exactly it.
Yay. Welcome.
I feel like if there was ever an episode where your disclaimer was appropriate, this is the episode.
Should not take anything seriously.
Of actual advice.
Please stop listening now.
I should feel like every time, this is Rebecca speaking. Do not take this as advice.
Please do the opposite.
No. Ladies, it's so nice to meet you.
I know.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for spearheading this because we're notoriously slackers. So
no, I disagree.
Okay, thank you.
I disagree, but I'm like a sucker for people that can riff. You two riff really well. And you talk about things in a just straight up way that I really appreciate.
Yeah. Fran's like, has she wandered into the wrong studio?
I know.
We riff really well. No,
I mean,
all their riffing is scripted. So
No.
Well,
she looked at me and said rip because she thinks I'm old. I'm sick of this bullshit. I'm done with it.
So here's the thing. Brody actually let me in on your secret that you guys are note takers and like you super prepare. And I said, well, I am excited to throw them off their game. I'm like, I don't know who's going to be more uncomfortable, me being in your presence or me trying to throw you off your game. But
I'm just going to eat popcorn over here.
Game on, guys. Game on. It's going to be so fun.
So today we're going to talk about, if I'm understanding everything correctly,
That's just it right there. She has to understand. I get it. Yes.
Mental health in rural areas.
Yeah. Small towns, right? So for your listeners, I started a nonprofit organization in 2019 called Growing Small Towns. And so I'm back in a town of 1,800 people. Was born and raised there. My husband and I.
Which small town?
Oaks, North Dakota. That's Oakes.
Up there in Oaks, North Dakota.
It's in Oaks, North Dakota.
In Dickey County.
In Dickey County.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The 14-year-old in me always giggles just a smidge.
I know. Well, yeah. I mean, who doesn't giggle at Dickey County?
Yeah.
So we moved back, my husband and I, who, everyone should know that he's just parked in the corner here.
He's sitting in the corner minding his damn business.
He is, and he's keeping his mouth shut.
He's
Keep your mouth shut, Jeremiah.
Wake up, Jeremiah.
You're in the presence of greatness, Jeremiah.
Isn't it funny that he wanted to sit in on this?
I know.
Well, what do you think so far,
we
honey?
established he's never listened to our podcast. Otherwise, he would know he's just fresh meat sitting in the corner.
I know.
He hasn't listened to Rebecca's either, though. So.
I knew that. I knew he was fresh meat, and I just brought him to slaughter like a lamb.
Rebecca, can I just sit in the corner? Oh, sure you can, honey.
Come on in, babe. It'll be fun.
You guys are are mean.
You
Quit
bet you
picking
can.
on Jeremiah.
Oh, North Dakotans can take it. We're
Hey,
fine.
And you know what? Brody's loving this because he's,
Finally,
he's
more
got some
testosterone.
balance of testosterone in the room. Yeah.
It smells a little worse in here, and it's great. So,
Yeah. It's the farmer sitting in the corner
But
there.
you have done
You wore
some
your short and
incredible.
clothes to come all the way out here.
You've done incredible things.
Well, so
Don't
I'm
even.
trying.
Yes, you have.
I'm trying. Okay.
Yeah.
So we moved back. It's been over a decade now. And I swear it's taken that long for me to kind of find my rhythm.
Yeah.
We also started our family right when we moved back. And as anybody who has children knows, like there's a whole, like just the lost years, like what the hell happened and like what, I've always been ambitious and I have like a career aspiration. And when my kids came along, it's like, how the hell do I do any of that? So all of that aside, my small town, it's not, and I've gotten a lot of shit for this, you guys, like, cause I podcast and I'm honest and I talk about what it's really been like. And there have been people that have said, well, it's too bad that moving back was such a blow to your ego. Like I've got,
no.
yeah. And here's the deal. I get it. Like without context. And if you don't actually know me, I get that maybe it would come off that way, but that's not what it is.
No.
It's just, it hasn't been easy.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's not.
It's not. So growing small towns for me is about people. It's not necessarily about our population growing. Like I'm not going to try to make 1,800 population of Oaks, North Dakota, even become the size of Aberdeen, or South Dakota, right? Like that's not the goal.
And you wouldn't want it to be.
No.
It really takes away. I mean, I love Oaks.
I do too.
Yeah. For our listeners out there, my brother Larry works for the Oaks School District.
Shout out to Larry.
Larry.
Hey, Larry.
Hey, Larry.
Hey, Larry.
Good times.
Oh,
Good
no.
times.
This is a delicious dish.
It is. Sweaty balls.
Oh, jeez.
It's perfect. It's Christmas time. Why wouldn't we be talking about that?
They moved there, I want to say 20-ish years ago. And it's a beautiful town. It's a beautiful community. It
is.
has wonderful, fantastic people in it. But growing up in a town of 350,
Right.
I can identify with some of the issues that come up with that.
Yeah. So for me, and the reason, like, what brought me to you two, well, first of all, that dude,
Yeah.
Brody, sitting in the corner is
That's
what?
me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
The
me.
other corner.
The other,
Yeah.
Your
that's
other
right.
brother,
Get in
Daryl.
get in the other
He's
corner.
the Tinder of podcasts.
Yes, yes, he is. I'm swiping right all day, Brody.
Jeremiah is right there.
He knows. He knows.
Again, small town. They're into weird shit, let me tell you.
Just throw your keys in this bucket. It's fine. I'm kidding.
I have a
I'm
garden
kidding. I
gnome
don't
in my
know
front yard.
any of this stuff. So what brought me to you guys is like the more that I'm doing this work. So growing small towns is more of a concept at this point. We actually renovated a big facility on Main Street. So you guys will have to come in.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
I've
I
seen
would love
pictures.
to.
It's gorgeous.
I would love to have you come, but that's not really what it is, right? That's just a landing pad for what I hope can be the cool shit we bring to Oaks.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about people. And when you think about people, what I've been thinking about a lot and what I hope I can dive into with you two is how much does being in a small town amplify all the problems that everybody has everywhere? So like when you think about the fact that there's just less people, so your petri dish gets a little smaller and everybody can see everybody.
Yep.
And does that magnify or amplify some of the challenges of just being human?
Mhm.
Right. And so I am excited to talk about mental health, not only awareness, but like what can we do about it? And from your experience as professionals in the field, is this something that you see challenging small communities differently? Not more. It's not nobody's winning any prizes here, right?
Right. Mhm.
Like who struggles worse? But I just feel like this is a key to what some of our challenges and the biggest things that we're trying to overcome. I feel like the overall social, emotional health and well-being of who we are is some of what holds us back.
110%, if not 110,000.
What's more than that? So
I think this is a perfect time for a Fran's fantastic because you have to
That's-
Music, please. Drum roll, crown. Come on.
That's Becky holding Fran's hand, being like, "It's okay, we're getting to your
Yes,
factoid."
exactly.
So-
I know, you know,
taking care of her emotional needs.
Thank you so much.
I'm her emotional support animal.
She really.
Here,
She's so
you can pet my
cuddly.
hand. Pet my hand.
Thank
There
you.
we
My hands are
there we
freezing.
go.
Okay. So approximately 1/5 of the U.S. population that live in a rural area, there's about 1/5 of the population that live in a rural area, and 1/5 of those living in the rural area, or 6.5 million, have mental illness. So if you really compare that to like a metropolitan area,
Right.
it's a huge number. It's a huge number. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And
I'm gonna go stats on you here, Fran. Is that really isn't mental health a struggle for
illness?
Mental illness, literally.
So is that
a struggle
diagnosable?
For everybody? Maybe.
So we're talking diagnosable mental
what are
illness.
The national rates?
Well, so as we talk about this, I think, I shared with you guys, like, I'm more of a talking points person. Like, as I think about these things, this is how it's presenting to me. And I'm not a professional. Like, clearly that is, at least I'm not a mental health professional.
Yeah.
But there's a couple things that I think I see on a pretty regular basis. And I would love to explore the overall health of those things in a context, right, of a community. So let's talk about Midwest nice. And then how that tends to lead to passive aggressiveness and or overall stoicism. Okay, so that's kind of a lot of things, but I feel that they're very, very much presented. Like that's the forward facing thing that I feel like I run into all the time. And I want to just look at everybody and be like, oh my God, like, what do you really think? And just say it. I feel like we struggle to be honest. Well, and right now too, we're talking about this from a community development standpoint. Like we're trying to explain what the community of Oaks is like. And every small town says, oh, our people are great. We're so nice. Well, what the hell does nice mean? What does that actually mean? And what can we, I just feel like we're so surface level with stuff. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I don't really like surface level bullshit. I'm just like, let's go deep and fast. And,
and in the Midwest, that's rough.
It's rough to move that way through the world.
We do not talk about that shit.
That's right. It is rough.
I don't know why you're talking about how you really feel.
But I think
there's no time for that.
You have to look at the context, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm in Groton, South Dakota, so population very similar, okay? And we're talking about farming communities. We're talking about rugged individualism.
That stoicism that Rebecca mentioned.
Independent, right? Self-sufficient, all good qualities that help people survive, right? And so they do have a more stiff upper lip. We can get through this. We don't need to rely on anybody. We can take care of this. Those qualities are not bad.
No.
Until they start killing you from the inside out, where you're struggling and you feel like it's inappropriate to ask for help.
Right.
And that's when I really feel sad about it. I don't really see it as much in a passive aggressive way, but I see it in a way where people are isolating themselves or using alcohol to deal with it. That's what I see a lot.
Right? Yeah. So I definitely, so what Fran, everything that you just said, I think that's definitely how some of this plays out, is just that isolation and binge drinking. I mean, let's be real. I brought that up in the topics because yes, I do happen to be having a beverage as we sit here.
It's Brody's fault.
But it is, he's a pusher.
I was asked to bring it. So.
He's a pusher.
Whatever.
But I think North Dakota is the number one binge drinking state.
It very well could be.
I think, at least I've heard that in some of the mental or some of the health, like there's been some health assessments community-wide they've been doing
too. Yeah.
Also, it's just like it's bitchin' cold. And so people just,
you hunker down.
We hunker down and we drink, which my whole thing is there's nothing wrong with alcohol. It depends on why you're drinking it.
Right.
And so I do feel like there's a lot of people that are numbing out.
Yeah.
And alcohol just seems to be a more socially acceptable choice than other things.
It's interesting that, sorry, Brody, it's interesting that it's more socially acceptable to be drunk than it is to express your feelings or say,
isn't that sad?
I've had a really shitty day, and just, vent to your buddy or whatever.
Yeah. Like, I've had a hard day and my heart feels really heavy and I just need somebody to sit with me for a minute. Ew.
Right.
Lady bitch.
Yeah. Can we just get a case of beer and split it instead?
Right.
Yeah.
So way back when we first moved here, my wife ended up, I can't even remember how she met this guy, but he was teaching paramedics in Frederick, which is about 10 miles north and very small town. And I have being the degree that I have, I'm not a doctor, but I am a master.
Yeah, you are.
Social work. And so they asked me to come speak about mental health. And one of the things that came up was you go on as a paramedic, you go on a call, maybe a mental health call or a suicide call. Not only do you have the isolation, because you can drive for a long time out here without seeing another house, but then they all are highly weaponized. Not everybody has an arsenal like Tremors. That's
Right.
the thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But everybody has a gun out here. And so the nature of all of this just gets amplified a little bit by the isolation meets then the armed nature of just the life out
It's funny
here.
you say that because I spent a couple of years working on 2 North, which is our behavioral health unit here in Aberdeen. And one of the doctors I worked with was from Columbia, the country, not the small town by here. And anytime somebody would be admitted for a suicide attempt, the first thing you always do is you say, what weapons do they have available? Because whether it's knives or guns or pills, you really strongly recommend that those get removed. And the number of people that would get in his face and say, we're not removing guns from that house.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, but like he just tried to kill himself. We're not removing the guns. And I'm like, you need to freaking remove the guns.
Yeah.
Right.
Not forever, but let's get this person through their mental health crisis. But that culture's huge. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, this
nothing
isn't a
at
Second
all.
Amendment issue.
No,
It's just
not at all.
Right.
The nature of I mean, I went pheasant hunting on Friday. It's just the nature
Yeah.
of life out here that you have weapons around. I mean, well, and hell, on the farm, Jeremiah, I'm sure blades and there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
All the time.
But that's why the suicide rate with farmers and rural areas is so
Yep.
much higher because
Yep.
they have access to firearms like everywhere.
Yep.
They do.
And it's usually older males.
Yes.
It's usually men that have been isolating themselves and they usually have access to guns.
Mm-hmm.
So at the risk of like putting you guys on the spot,
Uh-oh.
what are some things we can do? Even simple things, or because, okay, so like big picture, access in rural places is a problem.
It is.
It is. And I mean, we're the 5 of us sitting in here, including the hubs behind me here. We're not going to solve that right now. Like I get that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like, so I'll just tell you, earlier this fall, we did kind of a symposium about mental health at the school. And we had a speaker, and it's so crazy because I'm really attuned to energy. Like I walk,
sister, you are in the right place.
Thank you.
Except for
Oh,
Brody.
I feel
Brody
so
thinks it's bullshit.
Yeah.
But
No, they're talking about like reorganizing your energy, and I'm just going to move this chakra from here to here.
I believe in all of those things, too.
you don't move chakras, Brody. They stay put.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my problem.
Chakras
But
don't get moved; they get realigned.
I don't
And you
know what the
open
hell I'm
them.
doing.
I'm going to
Yes.
blow open your chakras.
She's
Okay.
blown
You
them
guys-
open.
I'll just
Look, your fabulous hair doesn't make you immune to energy, Brody. It's
I'm just
real.
gonna go in the corner with Jeremiah, and you guys just talk about your frou-frou. What have
I
you.
know. It's
But yes,
terrible.
energy's huge.
It is huge. And so what I find interesting is like a person that I wanted to somehow open up the dialogue, and even standing in front of the room, it felt so stilted. And maybe that was just because we don't do that a lot and talk about it a lot. One of the presenters cried a lot, which was great. She was super uncomfortable. And then, you've got the whole audience trying to not get in there with, you could I could feel all of that happening. But I just feel like, is talking about it enough? Or, what can we do?
Well, I think talking about it is the great first step, because there's the stigma, right? Everybody has mental health, and therefore most people have mental illness at one point, whether it's severe or not severe or whatever it is. And so I think when we start talking about that and we start acknowledging that, that is a great first step. When we look at the number of people who are suicidal, and I'm right now in the process of being certified as a first responder counselor. And the person that puts on that is a social worker. And she had a suicide note that when she was part of a suicide crisis team that would go respond to the schools. It was written by an 11-year-old.
Oh my God.
an 11-year-old.
Yep.
And we just had the death of, what was she, 13, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
We need to talk about this.
Right.
Because it's happening.
But
But
you know,
Becky, if you talk about suicide, it's going to put the idea in other kids' heads, and
You
they're
are
going to
That's
do it.
still an actual
You're
thing
so-
people think?
Yes,
that's a
it
myth.
is.
And that's a myth.
It's 110% a myth because they've been thinking about it. You are not, nobody's
Yeah.
going to go, oh shit, I hadn't thought about that.
Right.
Yeah,
God,
right.
I can't wait to go home. And
Yeah, that's not how this works at all.
No. And usually what they do is they feel relief because what you've done is you've taken the taboo away. You know, so in a therapeutic, I mean, I've done this with my kids. I've done this with my, clients. And we just say, have you thought about killing yourself? Like I am that blunt. I don't
Wow.
say, have you thought
Absolutely.
about harming yourself? I don't say, have you thought about hurting yourself? I say, have you thought about killing yourself?
Right.
Wow. And I say wow because that is extremely forward.
Yeah.
But again, I can roll with that. Because again,
it
it's
has
like
to be.
we
It's
can,
life. But Rebecca, it's life or death.
Right.
it is.
Yeah.
And oftentimes in those situations, the person, if they are, they'll say yes. They're not saying, whoa, like, hang on. So I used to work at a suicide prevention hotline, like not a 211 here in South Dakota is not what that is, but it was 1-800-SUICIDE in St. Louis. And when you ask people, they train you to do exactly that, to say, are you thinking about killing yourself? Not suicide, not hurting yourself, like Becky said.
Have you thought about
harming
ending it?
Yeah, no,
Well,
don't.
have we-
Because
have we-
those all mean different things to the person who's in that state.
Well, and is there a little bit here where, again, not to get into like the politics of any of this, but I sometimes wonder if we've gone so far towards political correctness, the idea of softening the language of it and not intending harm by the words we use. And it's like, but if we don't say what we mean, are we softening it too much where we're not, the words matter.
I go back to Brene Brown, who says clear is kind.
Yes, I say that all the time.
Unclear is unkind. And so it's one thing to say, have you thought about killing yourself? It's another thing if I say, you fucking pussy. Oh, I'm sorry if that can't be on your podcast.
Oh, it can.
Okay.
Yeah, it can.
Or if I say, you idiot, have you thought about killing yourself? Like, are you that stupid? That
Right.
would be unkind.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
But to say, if I'm asking that of a person, I know where they're at. I've already sensed where they're at.
Right.
And it's not a shock to either one of us when the words come out of my mouth. Fran, what's been your experience?
Always direct. I mean, not just with that, but with like my very first intake. Have you ever experienced sexual abuse? I mean, I'm just right at and you would be shocked at how many people say, yes, I have. And I've never told anybody that before on the very first session, the very first 30 minutes.
Because they've never been asked.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I am absolutely with you. It needs to be very clear and very direct.
And actually, what ends up happening is the person is relieved. Somebody has finally just opened up the door, thrown open the blinds
Yeah.
on the darkness that is this issue.
I was just going to say that. I mean, shame is different than, it's like you doing a bad thing or having a bad thought doesn't make you a bad person.
Right.
But when it's in the dark, when it stays in the dark, that's when it feels, if everything feels worse in the dark. And shame lives in the dark.
It
and when
does.
you, like you said, throw the blinds open and shed some light on it, and then you're like, oh, that's it.
But
well, I think it's like even the feeling of the only time I've ever experienced what I should have probably been on medication for in terms of depression was postpartum with our first child. I was a freaking wreck. And I had a lot of dark thoughts, a really, really dark, really hard, really scary thoughts. And I just think it's like, at the time I didn't know, well, I couldn't talk to my husband because there was no way I could articulate even the depth of what I was feeling. And like my mom didn't have that. Right. So I talked to my mom and it was just like, oh, honey, it's just, and she did the best she could too. Like this is no slam to my mom, but I just think it's recognizing there's situations that we find ourselves in that create more of this tension. Let's just say like all of frickin' 2020, just
dumpster fire.
Right. Whatever it was that anybody was feeling, everything got amplified. It was
really
awful.
did.
It was an awful, shitty time to be alive.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, it was tough.
I think, in rural America, there are lots of barriers, and we talked about some of them, like lack of accessibility, the stigma. But there's other factors too, in terms of, you live in an area where mental health professionals, we are absolutely full to the brim.
That's what I was going to say too.
Right.
We talk about access. I mean, Rebecca and I were talking about just access of planes. Like if we want to go to the cities, I either have to drive 6 hours or pay $1,800 to fly everybody there for the weekend. But this is a whole other.
Yeah, this is a life or death thing that you still can't get access
but
to.
You can't get in for 3 weeks. And by then, who knows what's going to happen.
And
I'm really interested to know what you guys have to.
Yeah.
Right. But in addition to that, let's say you can get in, but the person you get is not specialized in what your issue is, right? So they have no cultural knowledge. They don't know anything about LGBTQ. They don't know they might not even be licensed, to be honest with you.
They might not want to talk about suicide or depression or anxiety. They might have zero knowledge.
They live down the street from you.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have that bullshit hanging over your head. How many, I mean, again, we don't maybe have stats on this because I don't even know how this would ever get reported in a statistically relevant way, but how many people don't seek help because they don't trust that their stuff is safe, or they just don't want the person they go to church with to know.
It is one of the top 4 barriers.
1,800 people.
Bad gas travels fast in a small town.
Yeah.
But you know, I've had it work both ways. I've had people specifically ask for me because they know who I am.
Right.
Sure.
And I've had other people say, I don't even want to see you in the waiting room. Right. I don't want you to know that I'm a client. So it can go either way.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that the sadness of it all is that people are holding back because they're scared someone is going to say something about them or judge them negatively because they're willing to ask for help. That is the beauty of telehealth, people.
Yeah.
I think telehealth is blasting a lot of these barriers.
I hope so.
I do too, because people don't have to wait in waiting rooms. People can log in privately. Farmers can log in their combines. I mean, it makes us so much more accessible.
Yeah.
You don't have to waste travel time to get to your therapist
To me, that's
anymore.
the biggest thing. Like if you're coming from Oaks, that's over an hour.
Right.
One
to
way.
Aberdeen.
One way if you're going to come to Aberdeen. Now, one of the downsides to telehealth is, we have a representative that lives here in Aberdeen, and every once in a while he'll see me out and about and he loves to just like jab me. And he's a good guy. And he'll be like, "What can I do for you today, Becky?" And I'm like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about insurance companies continuing to cover telehealth. And let's talk about increasing our internet capabilities in these rural towns. Because I have clients in rural areas and our sessions will break up just because the internet isn't that great where they live.
I drove to Frankfurt today and couldn't send a meme. I mean, I couldn't send a GIF. I know.
Yeah. And if you can't
It
send
was
a
a
gift,
travesty.
It is. That's a mental health boost. Someone missed out on that boost in their
I had to describe the joke I was doing and just didn't
it
land
doesn't do
right.
it justice. No. So, I mean, telehealth has been amazing. But I get on this soapbox every opportunity I can. And that is, we need to make sure telehealth's been around for a long time. It wasn't until COVID that most insurance companies decided to cover it.
Right.
And so when we talk about accessibility, it also means affordability.
You bet.
And not too many people can pay out of pocket for a counseling session.
And affordability is totally dependent upon the insurance companies. And
100%.
some of them are going to pull it as fast as they can pull it because people are actually utilizing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Which that just drives me bananas because it's like, okay, let's pay, it goes back to most insurance companies won't cover marriage therapy, but they will cover the individual therapy after everybody's divorced. How effed up is that?
Totally.
Yeah, it is. And it's the same thing with telehealth. And it's like, is it easier to pay for the hospitalization stay? Or does the insurance company just hope to get out and somebody else have to pay for the funeral? And I know that's dark, but here we frickin' are.
Right. It's like all health, isn't it? Like when are we going to get insurance companies to value the proactivity of preventative measures versus the fallout of not doing anything preventative and having an actual either crisis and or.
We've had one major insurance provider already pull away from telephone counseling, which was all of that was covered under telehealth. So if somebody's Wi-Fi was just being obnoxious, I would just say, okay, I'm going to give you a call and we'll just do, if that's okay, we'll just do it via telephone. One of the major companies has already dropped that and telephone services are no longer covered.
But they're okay with like a FaceTime or a Zoom?
Yes, that's okay. Just
But
not telephone.
Phone. Oh my Lord.
Right? It's frustrating.
Well, okay. So we're talking specifically about counseling, right?
Yes.
And like talk therapy.
Right.
I feel like in my area, it's still like seen as something, and maybe this is just the idea that I get that you only go to those things when something's wrong with you.
Oh, Fran, you addressed that because you feel strongly about this.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, like, I believe in the value of, I like process things out loud.
Yeah.
And
the poor dude in the corner here, he can't hold all of my thoughts, and like he just can't. It's not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair to do that to him.
Right.
And I love having a professional to talk to.
Well, and let's talk therapy, because I think that's a common phrase used for what we do.
Right.
But what do we do, Fran?
I mean, look, we are promoting this podcast primarily because we want to destigmatize mental health, and we want it to be preventative because it is so much easier for us as providers. If I get a couple in that's 1 year into their marriage and they're starting to struggle, there's hope. I get a couple 30 years in where they hate each other and they're plotting the death of each other. Okay, you know what? Here's the number of an attorney. That's really good.
Right.
Right. It's like, why don't we...
It's got to be defeating for you guys.
Hey, Becky, where did you get your incredible master's degree in counseling?
Well, let me tell you, the same place I got my amazing bachelor's degree, Northern State University.
Wow. Did you know that now they offer programs in K through 12 school counseling and clinical mental health, and they are KCREB approved?
Stop it.
Yeah, I'm not lying.
KCREB is such a big deal, too.
It totally is. And right now they have a trauma focus, which is a standalone course, not to mention their integrative mental health care class, which, get this, includes yoga. It includes specific disorders and how to treat them,
acupuncture,
ADHD, all the cool stuff, even spirituality.
No.
Yeah.
How about aromatherapy? Because I love my essential oils.
Even that. Yep.
I love it.
And the program helps prepare students to take and pass, hopefully pass the licensure exams and get national certification.
I love that. So if you're interested,
contact Northern State University.
Hey, it's Brody, producer of Shrink Wrap. Just wanted to let you know that you can now purchase all kinds of great Shrink Wrap merch over on their Bonfire site. We're talking mugs, water bottles, sweatshirts, t-shirts, tote bags, all of it. From the sassy to the regular, you got some great Shrink Wrap merch over on Bonfire. Head to the Facebook page to find the link or search Shrink Wrap Podcast on bonfire.com. And now, back to the episode.
10 million years ago, there was this movie. Maybe you
was
remember.
Was it 10 million?
I think Brody was in diapers, but
knowing Fran, it was.
Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah.
It was called The Accidental Tourist. And I
remember that movie.
Okay, a poignant line out of there. And I remember thinking this was when I had babies in Groton, was living in a small town is a great place to raise kids. But is it a great place to raise adults? And I thought,
that's what growing small towns is about.
Oh, wow. I thought, you know what? Let's think about that. In some ways, it absolutely is. It is in the sense that I can call any one of my neighbors at 3 a.m. and say, all the shit backed up in my house. They
Literally.
Seriously, 3:05, they'd show up in pajamas and help me. Whatever it is, I'm not kidding you.
It is.
If I don't know where my kid is, I have 3 neighbors calling me. Do you know what Camille's doing? I'm like, oh, thank you. I couldn't find her. Anyway, we look out for each other.
Yes.
On the flip side of it, I think that we are in our own little bubble and we are not open to necessarily, I think we're getting better. Different cultures, different ideologies, different ways of thinking, normalizing mental health. I think we're getting there. But
it's like we are our own brand new culture, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah, normalizing mental health.
Yes.
And it just drives me apeshit because we all have it.
Mm-hmm.
We all have it.
Right. And I think it's like, how do we go so long without the emotional and intellectual and mental pieces of our person being something we talk about? Like, it's always been there. We've always been this holistic person with all these facets. And how is it that stuff was what? I don't really get it. And I feel like I came out of the womb just super primed to be super feely. And everyone was like, what is this?
Well, you were probably born an empath.
Yeah, well, I am.
If we really want to whack people out, that's a good way to make people's heads explode.
Well, and you're a type 7 Enneagram, right?
Yes, sir.
And of the subtypes of Enneagram, she's a sexual type 7. Which isn't what it sounds like. It's just
sexual 7.
It's
go girl.
It's just super in depth. Obviously, as she said, she didn't shy away from the hard conversations and the big conversations and the deep conversations. But it's just one of those subtypes, and so
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, so it just makes me feel particularly like a weirdo
Oh, totally.
Do you know what I mean?
You're
I'm just
so
like
sensitive.
And I grew
You're so
up.
sensitive.
I grew up. My dad turned 75 just yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday, Rebecca's
Dad.
dad.
Birthday.
He's awesome, and the older I've gotten, the more I've learned to kind of, well, there's boundaries. Okay, he's our next door neighbor. You can talk to the man in the corner. We could talk family business. We could talk living in the town of origin. I mean, there's
Got a everybody love Raymond situation going on over there.
good gravy. It's it's crazy, but I grew up, and everybody's parents, like for the most part, I shouldn't say everybody's, because some parents are actual shit.
Yes,
but, I mean, some parents are actually terrible and shouldn't have ever had children. Like,
shouldn't have been allowed to have children. Yep.
But for the most part, barring those extreme circumstances, everyone's doing the best they know how to do.
They're doing it with what they learned,
right?
Which typically wasn't great.
It was just like, oh, you're so sensitive, and it was
yes,
and it wasn't until I got older and I was like, is this really it? And I mean, I had to explore that on my own. Therapy was a big part of that for me,
right?
And kind of getting to be like, no, like this was actually, I was wonderfully and fearfully made, just like this.
Yes.
And this is what I was meant to bring to the world. And knowing that there's vices, there's good and bad for me, just like there is for everybody. But keeping all of that in perspective, I just think that's the kind of stuff that I want to see us explore more in terms of community development. Because honestly, people won't find a way to belong in a town unless they can bring their whole selves to the table.
I think
at least that's what I think. This is one of my suppositions.
Yeah. One of the biggest things, I think, regardless of the size of the community you're in, is when we talk about the big stigma of not wanting people to know our business and stuff like that. I think regardless of who you are, where you work, what you do, if somebody entrusts you with something that you can tell is sacred, near and dear to them, hold that. Even if you're not a therapist or a doctor bound by confidentiality or HIPAA, which you should, and some still don't, but you should take that as a sacred honor and a sacred oath. And I think there are times, both in small towns and bigger towns, where people abuse that.
I think that's a beautiful place to start. And that's an easy thing. And all of us, if we're honest about it, we probably have betrayed a trust.
Oh, sure.
Here and there. And that's
every one of us.
Every one of us probably has. And yet what a great reminder.
Yeah.
And that's just integrity as a human. It's holding confidentiality, holding sacred space. And I do think it's a beautiful place to start. I think the second place to start is don't talk shit about people.
I still struggle with that one because I'm sarcastic and I like to make fun of things. And sometimes that's people. And I need to stop that.
Well, and
that's so honest.
But I'm not saying it's a struggle of mine. I think we all do that at times. I mean, I'm going to own that too. But it's like, if you do that, then people don't see you as that safe person to confide in.
Yep.
True.
The other thing I think of when it comes to that is when somebody talks shit around me, then I always wonder what shit they talk about me. And so then I try to remind myself, if you're talking shit about somebody, you're allowing that person to wonder, what shit do you talk about them when they're not there?
Well, and it's so easy to get caught up in that. It's so easy and it's cheap. And I definitely, I'm just thinking about this past weekend.
You fall prey to it. Yeah. And you don't realize you've fallen prey to it. And then you're like, damn it.
Yeah.
That isn't who I want to be. That's not who I am at my core.
Right.
So let me say what happens if you come to me as your therapist and you know me or you know my kids. A lot of people will say, oh, yeah, I know Anthony or I know Camille or whatever. Here's the rule. I cannot tell anybody you're my client, and I'm not going to tell anybody you're my client. And if you see me in public, I'm going to keep going. Unless you come up to me, you don't exist. I am never going to blow your cover.
No.
Right.
And I say that to them right away. And what I'm seeing, and you guys, I'm so excited about this because I am getting more young men, I would say college age.
Yep.
Many of them are rural. They're farmers, young aspiring farmers. And they are not feeling the stigma that their dads felt. And I'm like, I am so freaking proud of you.
Yep.
Right.
It's awesome. And it's not because they had to. They're not court ordered. They're like, you know what? I see myself repeating some patterns and I don't like it. And I don't want to be that. I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome. But I'm also seeing in groups of women, like we have a cool group of women in Groton. And it's like when we get together, we're not just talking about like the weather. You know, if somebody brings up something and they're like, you know, this person died in my family and my husband's really struggling or whatever the hell it is, we're there for each other. And we're not like, oh, I can't wait to go home and tell somebody. I mean, I feel like there is a more opening. I really do.
And a sacred space.
Yes. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I really do.
Do you think, what does age have to do with some of this?
A ton.
What do you say?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like, so I have a lot of, I tend to be friends with people that are a bit older than me. I've always been an old soul in that respect. And some of them will say like, oh, it's just so great when you get to this age, you just, you know, like the whole thing is like, all your fucks are gone. Like and actually it's my good friend, we were just talking about this, that there's this whole TikTok. I haven't seen it, but apparently this woman talks about how like when you're young, you have like a duffel bag full of fucks. And then at this point, all you got is a clutch. Like you can only fit your fucks in a clutch, which I thought was super funny. A clutch of fucks. Like, isn't that hilarious? You know?
I like that.
Like, that's right. These are the ones. They matter. And I'm going to give these. Like, I'm going to hold these, but all the other stuff goes away.
That is based on the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson.
Yes, which is a great book. A great book. So I think what I always question is there any way to shorten that learning curve without just living the life? You know, like, do the years just have to tick by?
Yes, there is a way.
Is there?
Yes.
Here's another Fran's fantastic factoid.
Let me just say, Fran just licked her finger and flipped her her page. So shit's getting real.
All right, Rebecca, let's buckle up.
It's really about you parenting your kids. So when your kid comes home and your kid looks sad, you say, "Hey, I noticed that you look really sad. What's going on in your heart? This is boy or girl."
Yeah.
And you don't just let them skip away. You're like, we're going to talk about this. How are you feeling? And what is leading to that feeling? And what can we do about it? And you normalize talking about stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It's very challenging when you weren't taught that way. And then, of course, you know, if you're married, if your spouse wasn't taught that either.
Oh,
right. And I'm not pointing any fingers or head nodding in any direction. It's just the truth, right? Like we don't, and then suddenly it's like, is all of this too touchy feely? And but I can tell you this. So we've got 3 kids, right? Our middle guy.
How old are they, by the way?
They're 12, 10, and 7.
Okay.
So 2 boys, older 2 are boys, and then we got a girl. Sometimes he reminds me so much of me as a kid because so there's just one time this summer we were in our building renovating and he was working on something and I didn't have the time. Like I was really busy. He was working on like a project, right? And he was just hammering nails into a piece of wood or something. And he was like really jacked up about it. He brings it upstairs to me and shows it to me. And I'm like, oh, where did you get that wood? Like where? And he's like, oh, it's downstairs. And then I said, oh, that was the contractor's buddy. Like he might need that stuff. And he like really fell apart.
Oh,
like he got really upset. And I thought, you know, right away I was like, I don't have freaking time for this. Like I don't have time for you to have a meltdown. But I go downstairs and he's down there and he was like ragey. You know, I'm just like so angry. And I don't do this, haven't done this often, but this stands out in my mind. I sat down and he didn't want to, but I pulled him onto my lap and he just sobbed. And I honestly, it was like, hadn't really been there much in the summer. Like it had been a rough go. And I thought, God, sometimes all kids really need is just to be held really tight.
Yeah.
And I know that's not right for every kid, but you know, I didn't even say anything. He just cried. And then I said, are you feeling better? At some point, he's like, yeah. And then he's like, I'm sorry, Mom. I was like, you don't need to be sorry. But I get that it's uncomfortable even for parents sometimes, but they're just humans in a less adapted form.
Oh, I like that phrase. Yeah.
I mean, they're just little people. They just like we are, you know, only they don't have the language. So what else can we do, you know, to help? Because it's talking about it, but in what way that's actually helpful, right?
Teaching them the language. That's important. So giving them the words like, okay, so are you feeling hurt? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling angry at somebody? Are you feeling like I scolded you?
Yes.
you know, and really kind of digging deeper and giving them the words for that, because how the heck do they know?
Right.
And I think that when you are having this time, this quality time, like one of the things I've always hammered with my kids is being kind to the kid that's left out, standing up for the kid that's bullied. I mean, I almost got to the point of brainwashing, but
check out last week's episode to learn all about brainwashing and Fran's cult of anti-bullying.
Yes, exactly.
I'm signing up.
But I hear stories where my son calls some kid that's never invited as a 22-year-old and invites him out. And that kid shows up because Anthony asked him to come as a young man. And it's like, you know, you can teach your kids all kinds of things, right? You can teach them to, you know, change oil in a car and do all kinds of things. But if you can teach them to be kind, man, that's really important.
Well, we were talking about, Jeremiah and I were talking about this on the way up here. It's also reminding ourselves that kids learn by watching us. Like you can throw at them all day long what you want them to do.
Yep.
They're gonna pick up a lot by watching you.
Absolutely.
So are you a person that includes people? Are you a person that's kind? Are you modeling what you believe to be true?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's always a good gut punch for the parents. Like,
it is. So I have to tell you guys, I'm a huge fan of random acts of kindness. I just love doing shit like that. I absolutely do. And a few years ago, it was Christmas time. So it was this time of year, and we were at Walmart, and the guy behind us, this old man, really old, was buying a
How old was he?
Super Fran. Yeah, he was older than Fran, if that gives you any indication.
No.
Yeah, he was basically
was 2
made of
grades
dirt.
above Fran in school.
You guys are a-holes to each other. So
But anyway, so he's buying a carton of eggs. That's it. One carton of eggs.
Right.
And so I say to the cashier, I'm like, just ring up his eggs and I'll pay for him. And so she grabs the eggs and she rings them up, and he just looks at us like if looks could kill.
He was
and,
pissed.
And he marches off. Yeah, he was so pissed off.
You shamed him.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so Allie went running after him, our oldest, and she's like, sir, we just this like random act of kindness. He thought we were stealing his eggs. He thought and he was going off to get another carton of eggs.
Those bitches.
That's funny.
And then he gets in his car and he has North Dakota plates. And so, of course, right?
Damn North Dakota.
But here's what I'm thinking. You know, like his wife was probably like having to make this last batch of whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
And was out of eggs. And so she sends him to the store. And if you have North Dakota plates, you're at minimum 30 miles away. And he's like, damn it, I had to drive all this way. And now these bitches stole my eggs.
Oh my God.
So honestly though, like what I was thinking was he was pissed because he didn't need your charity.
Right.
Which, okay, I'll just say
I haven't had that happen yet.
that's happened. I've seen that happen.
Okay.
And all I want to say, like, take the chance that that's the random response.
Yes.
We aren't in control of what people choose to do. Your intention, this is where attention matters.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're still putting out good in the world. If the person blocks it and doesn't receive it, that doesn't make your good intention any less beautiful.
And, you know, if somebody is going to buy me my groceries or coffee or whatever it's going to be, I'm not going to take that as, oh, they must think I can't afford it or I can't support myself.
Right.
I'm going to take it as, you know what a beautiful gift. And so if you're listening out there and people do this for you, take it as a beautiful gift.
And pass it on.
And now, speaking of passing it on, have we ever been in the coffee line and you're like, I'll pay for the person behind me. And they're like, okay, that bill's going to be $45.17.
And you're like,
I was just thinking about that.
how about two behind me?
And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to today, but next time I'm here, I'm
That's super funny. Like, just kidding.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what they were ordering.
So you can bring them a muffin.
There's a bus behind you, so if you want to rethink that.
Right. But you guys do that at the market, Brody. You have that
Pour it forward. It's so cool.
Yeah, you can come up and pay for someone's beer or someone's drink or whatever, and
Coffee,
basically,
water, whatever.
Starting a tab, and if your name's on the board, then someone's bought a drink for you.
I just think that's so cool.
That is really cool.
Just yesterday for my dad's birthday, a random lady bought our dinner. Like I took my dad to lunch and I said, we're not inviting mom or Jeremiah. I said, it's just you and me, Dad. And he loved that. And this lady overheard us talking, knew it was his birthday. And she left the restaurant. And then the server came up and said, oh, by the way. And I was like, that's so special. Like it's a very, very sweet, very cool thing to do.
And I think speaking of parenting, like I watched my parents and they're in their 80s, very big service to their community, Lions Club, park board, nursing home. They were both EMTs on the ambulance. I mean, it was just everything. My dad is 84 and he's still on the Lewis and Clark board of directors.
Cool.
And goes to Bismarck once a month for his Lewis and Clark meeting. But I remember we were out, one time we were back home and we were out at the cafe after church and the Waltz brothers were out there. The Waltz brothers were having a birthday. I can't remember which brother was having the birthday, but I kid you not, they were 92 and 94.
Ah.
And so my dad was buying us our lunch, and I went up there and I bought the Waltz brothers their lunch. And you could see the pride on my dad's face.
That you did that?
We raised our kids well.
That's awesome.
Because my brothers are just as generous in the same and sometimes different ways.
She's talking about you, Larry.
Yeah, you, Larry. And you, Johnny Porkchop. Because my little brother listens too. And he's super awesome.
That's
I want to
awesome.
meet Johnny Porkchop.
Johnny Porkchop's phenomenal.
That's
he is
awesome.
an amazing, and so when we talk about, sometime on, past episodes, we've talked about, stereotyping men and this, that, and the other thing. I always say I've just been blessed, and you have too, to be surrounded by amazing, amazing men. Yeah.
Well, I give this one in the corner a lot of grief, but he's a good one.
Yeah, you got to keep him.
You.
You too, Brody.
Wrong corner, Brody. Damn it. But you did bring us drinks, so we're going to include you.
He did. I want to thank you both so much for entertaining this kind of.
We could go on forever, couldn't we?
Well, it's. I just think
That's
it's
the Rebecca effect right there.
It is. Yeah.
I just think it's so damn important. I mean, it's important. I think because I'm coming at this from not what does my community need today, but what is our community going to need in 20 years?
Yeah.
I want Oaks to be a thriving, relevant community long after I'm dead and in the ground, right? Yeah. I want, if my kids want to come back to a small town, I want Oaks to be the place they choose. I mean,
it's a cool town.
It's a very cool town. And I think a lot of this for me too, being that weirdo on the street, right? Who's a big feeler and I got big ideas and nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about 90% of the time. And that's fine. But it's also reminding myself when I'm sitting in a board meeting or I'm sitting in a group full of people that maybe don't express quite the way I do, is to try to assume some good intent.
Oh, Fran, tell her your philosophy on that.
You have a philosophy?
She does.
A Fran
do.
philosophy?
Well, I mean, I give it to Becky or other people. I always assume.
A Fran
philosophy. Fran philosophy.
Okay, whatever.
A philosophy. We're workshopping it.
Especially in friendships. I tell my friends this all the time. I'm always going to assume you're coming from the best possible place. No matter what you say to me or how you say it, even if you're having a bad day, I'm going to be like, oh, she means it well. She loves me. I always assume that.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Jeremiah and I have talked about that in our marriage too, right? Because it's super easy to be like, why do you always blah, blah, blah? And he'll be like, why do you always put the worst construction on my face?
Yeah.
Like, it's usually his face. I love you, honey, but his face. I'll be like,
super
why
handsome.
are you? Yeah, he's so handsome.
Yeah.
But I'll be like, why are you scowling when you say that? And he'll be like, can you just assume that I don't mean it in the shittiest possible way? And I'm
maybe
like,
it's just deep in thought.
And be like, I suppose I could.
Yeah.
But that'd be easy. And why do we want? Why do we want to make it simpler than it has to be? But I just think that that's an important thing, and trying to remember too that in a community, and this again, I'm saying this for me, and if any of my growing small towns listeners are listening to this, it's seriously trying to remember that everybody probably wants some version of the same outcome, which is progress and health and wealth for the community, right? Now, how we get there probably looks really different, but to try to stay. Because, we young progressive people, I'm not young anymore, but I'm young-ish, right? So we tend to bitch that everyone's closed-minded.
Yeah.
Well, we're being just as closed-minded when we judge them for the way they're being. And so all of that has been super helpful for me in the last year as I try to wade through this and try to show up fully Rebecca, because I think that's what I'm supposed to do. I think that's what we should all aim to do.
And listen to understand and not to judge.
Right.
And here's the thing. Here's the beauty about rural communities. rural communities look out for each other in terms of physical things, right? If I tripped and fell down my driveway, 35 people would be there. I'd have a casserole in the refrigerator. Someone would call me later, whatever, right?
So there with the casseroles.
Right, exactly.
Some really good casseroles,
I love
too.
the food, right?
Sometimes a hot dish too.
Right.
Sometimes a hot dish.
If you're in Minnesota,
Weirdo.
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that's the appropriate name, but carry on.
Or if a farmer has cancer and he can't combine, there's going to be 13 combines that show up and they're not going to even do their own crop until that one's done.
Yep.
Let's generalize and also do that for each other's mental health. When you see someone sad and you see someone isolating themselves or they've lost their spouse of 30 years, do the same thing.
Right.
And you don't
Bring
have
the
to
casserole. Show up.
That's all you have to do is show up.
Yeah, right on your
My
forehead.
grandma used to say, "There's starving kids in Africa. What are you so upset about?" And I'm like, I guess I'm not starving, but I'm still sad. Now what?
Right.
Yeah. So just embrace it.
Yeah.
So one idea that I want to share that I actually did, that can just be a simple way to show your love and care is like on Mother's Day, think of the people you love that don't have their moms.
Yes.
Or on Father's Day, the people you love that don't have their dads, and just send them a quick note and say like, I actually wrote handwritten cards last year on Mother's Day, and I just said, I'm thinking of you. Like, that day is hard when you don't have a mom to celebrate.
Right.
You did up until a year ago or whatever.
So 5 years ago or whatever.
Right. Whenever. Yeah. And it's just like, I'm not saying that you need to like schedule out your niceness, but it's just, I don't know, normalizing grief is a big deal. So I'm going to actually give props to my husband here. He just asked me the question, like, what kinds of things should we be looking out for in one another? You know, like besides someone loses a spouse or loses a loved one, obviously there's like a trigger. There's like an obvious thing. But what other things in our kids maybe too are warning signs that something might be
and
off?
Adults. Yeah. You go, Fran.
I mean, I was always the family where the kids were always at my house. And I figured if you're dumb enough to let your kid come in my house, I'm parenting your kids.
Yes.
So,
And psychoanalyzing them. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
no. See, at our
Back then it
house,
was phrenology. So
She would study the little lumps on their skulls.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah. We are just a bag of assholes over here.
Not a clutch, a great big pig.
oh my gosh.
Giant
But if they're on my counter and they're eating and there's food falling out of their mouth, if they're grabbing food out of their fridge, I'm like, hey, guess what? At our house, this is what we do. We chew with our mouth closed. Great. That's awesome. And we're going to ask permission before we open the fridge. And then you say, thank you. Right. And they're like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, I'm raising them all. That's the way it is. They know it. You
Takes
know
a
what?
village.
I want to send my kids to your house. Can I send my kids to your house?
You can
Bring them over.
Jeremiah
Absolutely.
gave a great big thumbs up back there.
Yeah, like let's just send them to France.
Don't let him poop in her bathroom. She draws a line there.
There's a whole other story to that. But I think, and also the kids that everyone is isolating because they talk too much or they don't have social skills. Those are the ones that you really focus on in a community. You teach them, you have them come to your house. You say, okay, you know, you've talked quite a bit now. Now I'm going to talk. We're going to take turns, right? So I'm going to listen to you and then you're going to listen to me. And you teach them some social skills because they want desperately to fit in. They
Or
just
if
don't
you
know how.
In a small town, if you see them at the basketball game, if you see them at bingo night or whatever it might be, sit down next to them for 5 minutes and just say, hey, how's it going? And then that's another opportunity for like, okay, now you've talked. Now I'm going to talk. But take a moment and just touch base.
Can I tell you, like, I listen to that and I love it, but that feels hell scary to me. Like,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, sit with that girl.
Right? I mean, it does just like, because I can just imagine, I guess it depends on the kid. It depends on the parents. Like, I feel like I would only do that if I really knew the parents would be okay with it.
I think that's fair.
I don't.
You know,
Yeah,
I know.
I can tell. And I'm just saying, honestly, like,
And another
be like-
revelation from Shrink Wrap. Fran is all out of fucks to parent other people's kids.
It's so true.
Oh my God, she's down to a coin. She's down to a coin purse.
I threw my clutch away. I have zero fucks.
No, I love this. And I'm saying that honestly because the last thing we ever want to do is be like, who the hell does she think she is? That's immediately what I felt in my
Midwest nice, right?
felt in my whole
Right.
body.
That's
Just
fair.
what about for the people that you really love, but you just maybe they aren't necessarily open to, like, maybe you don't have a super giving relationship, like where feels get exchanged a lot, but you care about them. So like my husband and his friends, right? How can we talk about ways to broach the subject if you see that somebody's struggling or you're worried about someone?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, again, like grief is something in a small town where people lost somebody. So know there might be something going on, right? But like the other things that are just simmering things and they seem off. Or, what should we be looking for and what should we do if we see something? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
we're talking about the people that we would love enough to
I think reach out. With. And I think, it depends on the person and how you do that. So what do you stop by? Do you call? Those would be my two favorite things, at the top. But if you know that they're not going to be comfortable with that, then maybe you text. But just say, hey, I'm worried about you. Mm-hmm. Can I stop by for a few minutes and talk?
With a farmer, you say, hey, let's go check out the crops and I'll pick you up, right?
Yes.
Or let's go look at the machinery. And you don't even say I'm concerned about you. You just
or let's go
one-on-one, right?
Let's go sit in the shop. That's where everybody sits, the shop, apparently.
I feel the reason I asked that in a very awkward and not well-spoken way, it's just like, that's the thing. We worry a lot about being taken the wrong way. And then we do nothing. Mm-hmm. Do you not think that happens a lot, right? We're so worried about how our reach out's going to be received that we just go, oh, screw it. I care about them, but I'll just pray for them. Like and it's like, you could pray for them, but what if they knew?
I think it goes back to what you said earlier, Rebecca, when you said, you might buy the coffee for the person behind you and it might piss them off, but do it anyway.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same thing. You reach out and you just say, hey, I am worried about you. I'm here for you. We can talk now. We can talk later. And then, if they're like, screw her, she's an idiot.
Or I'm just thinking about you. I don't know why, but you keep popping up on my mind. Let's go have some coffee or let's go have a beer or whatever.
I have a friend that does that. Like she actually will send me random texts that just say, gosh, you've been on my mind. And I that doesn't even have to have anything going on. I don't have to, but I'm always like, oh, that's so kind and generous, right? I don't know. I just think that this is a key part of community.
Yeah. And when you say what to look for, I think people, if you're looking and you actually care about anybody, when someone's off, right? You've got a pretty good gut sense that this person isn't as talkative. They look sad. They're withdrawing more.
Haven't come to church in weeks, whatever it might be.
Right. They're not showering.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Shit.
It happens.
Jeremiah's laughing in the background.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's out of convenience. I'll back him up.
Yeah. Damn. Sometimes I just don't shower. That sucks.
I should say if not showering is out of character for them.
Right.
Yes.
We don't worry about Rebecca, apparently.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, haven't washed my hair in days.
So since this, in summary here, as this is a crossover episode, I think each of you should give your plug to the other audience, right? And what you do.
Thank you, producer Brody.
Just looking out for the audience numbers here. So, Rebecca, you want to start?
What am I doing?
Plug your podcast.
Oh, yeah. My podcast is The Growing Small Town Show. You can listen to it on Stitcher, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast.
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon.
And what info are people getting from the Growing Small Town
show? What is the Growing Small Town Show? Essentially, we talk about any topic relevant to the growth and development of small towns. Could be economic development. Sometimes we have experts. Sometimes we have just people doing cool shit. Because my whole thing is I want to showcase the wide variety of amazing people that have chosen to live in a small town. Yes. So people I want to break the stigma of what it means to be a small town resident.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then Franne and Becky, for the Growing Small Towns audience, what is Shrink Wrap, who may not have heard of you?
Shrink Wrap the podcast.
Shrink Wrap the podcast.
Okay, Fran's frozen. Go ahead.
No, it's a mental health podcast and we make people laugh and we're breaking down the stigma of all kinds of mental health topics like depression and anxiety and stalking and emotional abuse, you name it, baby.
And the other thing I'd like to throw out there too is we do speaking engagements. So if you have a small town out there and you would like us to come, we would definitely do a talk on suicide or community. Pretty much between the two of us, we have close to 50 years of mental health experience. Most of that's Fran's. No, I'm kidding. I couldn't resist.
I am so done with you people.
That's so fair.
But
you can
we
check out
do-
Fran anytime. It's fine.
We do have a lot of mental health experience between the two of us in different areas. We both have an area of expertise that's a different, and some of it crosses over. So we are always happy to come out and do that as well.
Oh, well,
Check us
consider
out.
yourselves booked. Like,
Yes.
I have an event space.
Oh,
Yeah, you're coming my way, guys.
I love it.
Coming up north.
I love Oaks.
Yeah,
I want to
well, come
go
and see us.
I want to go to Sweets and Treats, get some fudge, look at some books.
Sweets and Stories.
Sweets and Stories. Sorry.
I
Yeah.
had to just, she's great. Right across the street from my
Ice
my
cream
space.
sandwiches that are sometimes made with the famous Larry Engel monster.
That's right. That it actually is on the board.
His monster cookies are the best.
Yeah. They
Freaking
make an ice cream sandwich out of them. Her brother. Isn't that something? Look at it. Just full
Yeah,
circle.
just full circle, small towns.
Good times.
Good
Well,
times,
on behalf
good
of
times.
Fran and I, I'd like to say we are the Shrinks.
And that's a wrap.